He's just profoundly kind, and that's rare. He's just a very gentle person.
He's really, I think, is an honest and really genuinely nice person, and he wants to share his knowledge.
He has always been a very hands-on uncle, even though he lives a couple states away. He is a fantastic uncle, and I'm very, very proud to be his niece.
But that's just Phil. He's a most pleasant person to be with all the time.
He's a happy person. He really is a happy person.
It's amazing what painting and art can mean.
The manager of the gallery in New York, he wished all of the artists were like Phil, because he said every morning he's up and he's out and he's painting. Every single morning he works so hard. It's very few people who it's their bread and their butter. It's everything they think about. It's everything they do.
My name is Amy Pahota, and I am the niece of Phil Sandusky, whom from this point forward I will refer as either as Uncle Pig or the Pig. And I feel I should explain that. Our family is really big on nicknames, and my uncle dubbed himself, before we could talk, that he was going to be Uncle Pig. And it has stuck, even as adults. I am 31 years old, and I still call him Uncle Pig, or the Pig, or Pigums. It may seem like an insult, but it's actually a very loving nickname for him. So I remember many family dinners that would end with him doing impersonations for us kids, or making up goofy songs, or end up wrestling on the floor, and yet he still would come back and would have fun with us even when we completely tired him out. Every visit, he always had his sketchbook with him. Right after I had my son, he was 10 days old, and we were there at my grandparents' house for Christmas, and I asked him if he would sketch a picture of me and Luke. And he spent an hour. The first time he sketched, it was half an hour. He didn't like that one, so he had to sketch another one because he wanted to make sure it was done well. It was very important to him, because even though he wasn't getting paid for this, it was very important that he sketch a good picture for me. And I have that framed in my house now, and I'll always treasure that as well. But I never see him without his sketchbook. I remember him taking me to dinner one day because he wanted to really encourage me about my writing and how important it was for me to get a good education. Not that he didn't think I had the talents, but he knew that with direction and guidance, I could go much farther. And it was very important for him to know that, for me to know that he was there to encourage me and to help me with that if I needed it. And he's always been very encouraging with that creative part of my life. I've always found his art to be very unique in that he paints what he sees. He doesn't try and paint something out of the picture just to make it look better. He wants to show exactly what he sees, whether there's an old beat down car, but that car is part of the picture, and he wants you to see it as it is, the whole picture. And I've always enjoyed his art.
Well, Phil always liked to have a pencil or colors in his hand, but when he was 6 years old, we could begin to see that his pictures were showing real talent for one that young. And we were very fortunate when he was young that we were a member of a church that had a very talented art teacher, and she took him in lessons at the church. Couldn't have been much better teacher in his beginning stages. And then as he got into high school and college, he met an artist, a very, very good artist named Cleve Miller. And Cleve was a very strong influence, and he was definitely a protege, I'll say, or of Cleve Miller. And Cleve Miller had a lot of influence on him. All this time in college, he was trying to help his family pay for his college by working at a UPS store from 11 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning, and then
Coming home.
what?
Coming home.
Coming home from there and sleeping for a few hours, and then he'd go to college during the day off and on, full-time courses in physics, and then he'd go to art with Cleve Miller, and he did all of that though, and still graduated with honors from Jacksonville University. But all this time studying physics, it was still art. We know that now in the background.
My name is Kaori Maeyama, and I'm a painter. I took his weekly class for about 5 or 6 years. He's very straightforward, and I really appreciate that. You know, when I was in his class, he would just tell me what's working, what's not working, and how I may be able to fix the mistakes, so to speak. And, you know, I don't need any like sugar coating. His way of teaching jived with my way of learning. So I have a feeling I learned very quickly a lot from him just by watching him paint. Was just like revolutionary, because I never painted. Actually, I never really painted before I took Phil's class. I still start in the way that Phil taught me, starting out with big shapes first, and then move on to smaller and smaller parts, so that you don't lose sight of the overall likeliness of the scene and the balance and value relationships, color relationships. That's very, very valuable, I think.
I first saw Phil's work at the Cole Pratt Gallery in New Orleans and really liked it. And then Katrina happened. A couple of months after Katrina had to leave New Orleans because it had destroyed my practice. So was in Jacksonville, very homesick, and was walking down the street past the Stellar Gallery, and there was Phil's work, and I was like, what is this New Orleans artist doing in Jacksonville? And they were like, well, he's from Jacksonville. He's a Jacksonville artist. And I was like, no, he's not. He's a New Orleans artist. And they're like, no, he's a Jacksonville boy. And it was interesting to me looking at the Jacksonville pieces he did, because they were so different from the New Orleans pieces. And that's when I really started to understand what a difference light makes in art. This is the first piece I got. This piece is amazing because depending on the light, one side of the street or the other lights up. And you can't tell in this light right now, you're seeing the beiges and the pinks and the blue tarp on the roof. But in other light, you pick up the blues in the street here with really vibrant pinks. And then in certain lights, the top of St. Anne's and the cross just brightens up and becomes the focal point of the entire picture. At other times, it's the top part of this pink house here where you can barely see those blue shutters. And then sometimes it's the caved in dark roof on this house here with this splash of orange, which you can barely see right there and right there. So you never know what you're going to see in this picture. You never know.
Hi, I'm Michelle Maney. I am Phil's wife of, I don't know how many years. I have to think about it. We were married in 1996 in December. We met at the New Orleans Academy of Fine Arts. We were in a drawing studio together. I was preparing for my last one-woman show. I noticed Phil, and we talked a little bit, but it didn't stand out in my mind. A few days later, I came home from work and there was a message on my answer machine. It was very sweet, very charming, asking me if I would like to go out, and that we had met at the studio. Unfortunately, I couldn't remember his name, and so I couldn't remember which of the guys at the studio this was. But I recognized his name as being an artist who also showed at the same gallery I did. So I called the gallery owner, Carol Robinson, and I said, Carol, describe Phil Sandusky to me, because I wanted to remember which guy it was. And she said, why? And I said, he's asking me out. I met him at a drawing studio, and he's asking me out. And she said, oh, Michelle, go out with him. He's got a good job. And I thought, okay, well, can you describe him to me, though? And so she described him, and I remembered who he was. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'll go out with him. So I called him back and accepted, and we went out for dinner. I just remember feeling like we were two sides of one coin. It just went from there, and we never separated after that. As the years went on, I sort of said to him at some point, you need to pursue this while you're young. You've saved some money, you've got a little bit of a bit of savings put away, and so you should really devote yourself full time to this, because you're doing a lot more than most full-time artists are. And so he agreed with that, and at some point decided that he would resign and that he would be an artist full time. And about the same time, I decided I would stop being an artist and I would go back to social work school. And so I went to social work school and got my degree and went my way professionally while he went his way with art. And it's continued that way ever since also.
Do you miss art?
No. No. I always joke that it's something that I always had a certain talent and ability, but I loved having done art, but it was very painful to do it. To actually be in the process was very hard work. Having done it and having a show, that I really enjoyed that part of it. But the other part was a lot of work and usually quite painful, because you fail more than you succeed. And you fail grandly. You have massive failure a lot. And so you have to have the kind of confidence Phil does. You have to have the kind of commitment Phil does. And I really didn't have that. And I think probably being with him helped me see that in a way. Not in a way that he ever discouraged me. I think he would love it if I was still an artist. But more that it was clear that the passion he had for it was not what I had. And so it made me want to find something that I cared about that much and that I felt that confident about. And so social work was that for me. So no, I haven't missed it.
Awesome.
And I get it vicariously by seeing what he does, by supporting what he does. My assumption from the beginning that art was his first love, and I would always be the mistress in a way. that I would, that I had an importance in his life, but that art came first, and that's how it should be. And I think I understood that because of my art background, and not because I had that level of dedication to it, but because I recognized it, if that makes sense. It's not like I come second in a way. It's not like that at all. But it's just this understanding that art is who he is, that his art is his reason for being on this planet, and that the best way that I can honor that and the best way that I can be a true partner to him is to support that in any way I can. He has enormous discipline and enormous commitment to that vision that he has. So my role then is to be a cheerleader and be someone who encourages him when it gets tough, when he's having doubts, which is rarely. He's a very confident artist. Yeah.
Well, I guess I've been doing this all my life, ever since I can remember. My parents, and so many parents do, think that their children are talented, but every now and then there are parents who are right. But they saw that I was talented when I was trying to use crayons to color a picture of the sunset, and I started bawling because, it wasn't bright like the sun. And so they started getting me into art classes, and I was very, very fortunate that eventually I went through a few little classes when I was very young, like 6 and 7 years old and so forth. But when I was in third grade, I got in with a teacher named Marjorie Edwards in Jacksonville, Florida, who did not mind working with children. And what's interesting, and you, all back throughout art history, painters have started really early. And I think the earlier you start doing something, when your brain is more plastic, things become second nature for you that other artists who start later in life will have to kind of, struggle with for a lot longer. And so I was really lucky that I got instruction at an early age. And it wasn't just because I was gifted. Kids can do anything. I mean, there were, sitting on Marjorie Edwards' little rack, were several little copies of the Mona Lisa. And not just mine, but other kids as well. Kids can do a lot more. They just have than people think. They just have a very short attention span. And I think these days, kids' art education is just, it's not really, in my opinion, it doesn't really seem to be too serious. It's more about squirting glue on things and dropping glitter on stuff, and not really, developing the skill and discipline you need to visually communicate. And kids can do that. And so I was lucky to find that my parents found a teacher who was willing to work with a child. And so that just set me off on a very early trajectory. But when I came to New Orleans, and it was kind of coincided with a time that I felt like my painting was kind of tight and too academic, and I was starting to look at actually at that time, some post-impressionist painters, and I was just thinking to myself how much fun they seemed to have painting. And so I wanted to cut loose a little bit more, but my academic discipline kept me from going off the deep end, and just kind of made my academic painting, a little more loose, a little more impressionistic. At the same time, I was just taken by the beauty of the city, and the architecture here, being brought up in Jacksonville, which I love and still love to this day. It's my hometown, but you come to a city that's hundreds of years old, and you see this incredibly beautiful old architecture, and then the lush tropical foliage here too. I mean, there's papaya plants that grow in this town. There's wild parrots flying around. it's just artistically just a beautiful place to be, and so outdoors. And so I just started getting more and more interested in landscape painting. I still did figure painting and portrait painting, and a little bit less still life painting. And at first, landscape painting seemed to take the place of still life painting, but then eventually it became the tail that wagged the dog. It's just become my new love, and it's definitely the most challenging thing. I mean, working from the live subject, if you compared it to target shooting, it would be like shooting at a target that's moving and trying to hide from you, you know? So, I mean, it's just really difficult, which is challenging and edifying. And also it makes you draw on so much of what your vision is, which is memory, your understanding of the subject, and you're connected with that fugitive, that fleeting moment, that those time changes, you know, and you really become very attuned to that. So that's why I love landscape painting. It's just endless possibilities. But the reasons I do it and what really makes me excited about it, a couple of things. One is just like I'm saying, going out but I feel like I'm going to discover something every day. I feel like this is the day I'm going to turn over a rock and make a great discovery. And I have made great discoveries, a lot of which is personal discoveries. It may be reinventing the wheel that other artists throughout history have found. But in any case, I have that feeling of excitement. There's another thing about being a painter that I just am passionate about, and that's orchestration. There's something just wonderful about putting nothing nondescript things on a canvas, and together as a whole, they make something really beautiful. I just relish that. The more ugly a part is, the more potential it has to be part of a really beautiful whole. And so I just love orchestrating these grayed out colors and together those grayed out colors make a beautiful color harmony or evoke a sense of light and a sense of shininess or whatever, a sense of the quality of the subject that I'm trying to paint. You know, it's been a long road to hoe. You know, there was a period of time that I had to, you know, I burned through my profit sharing when I left my engineering job in about 3 years. I look back upon that with great reproachment, you know, but you know, when I was an engineer, I had a really happy, you know, I spent, you know, I had a really, you know, high standard of living and like to do lots of fun, nice things, you know, and so it took me a while to learn how to live, you know, with a lower expense. And there were times I had to get a job working in a frame shop part-time to make ends meet. And I've cast a much wider net. A big part of what I've done is teaching, and that's something that I enjoy doing. And it's another way of heightening people's awareness and appreciation of the visual experience. When someone can see your painting, then that has a little fugitive, a transient little effect. You know, they enjoy, they can see through your eyes the world. But if you teach someone else how to see the way an artist does, it just opens up a whole lifetime body of work. And I have amateur students whose lives are enriched on that level. They just appreciate what they see a lot more. And I've had a few artists who came to me as students, and I was their predominant teacher, I'm proud to say, and they have become first-rate artists in the community and other places, you know. So that's very edifying, you know. I would say that generally, in just the broadest brushstrokes, I want to heighten people's awareness and appreciation of the visual experience. We're so caught up in our normal everyday communications with each other that are pragmatic about the hard surfaces and about the dangers and threats in our surroundings, about the surface of everything, because that's what we deal with for our survival, and that's what most of our communication is. But that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of our experience. This deeper phenomenological, subjective visual experience, it just enriches life so much. And artists in general, that's what we deal in. We bring that to the surface. We make people's everyday experience richer. Not just painters, but writers, poets, sculptors, all kinds of artists. That's what we do. We make life richer by pulling up in front of your face the full richness of the deeper, that vast expanse of the iceberg beneath the surface of the water, that richer phenomenological experience. And that's what my goal is to do. And my goal also is to try and educate people about that, as well as just do it myself as an artist. I would say, art advice to art students and people pursuing it is just see the weakness in what you do and try and make it better. If you want to be an artist, you're not cheating anyone but yourself. You can make a fortune just schlepping paint on a canvas. There are all kinds of artists who do that, because how much money you make is completely independent of the quality of your work. The two have nothing to do with each other. So, for me, it's the more, when I talk about success as an artist, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about how well you communicate the visual experience, how much you can enlighten people. And so that should be your objective if you want to be a fine artist. And I don't really care. I do what I have to make a living, I put the art first. And I think here's a higher level answer to your question here. And that is, there are commercial artists and there are fine artists. And I don't, for 1 second, look down my nose at people who are commercial artists. In fact, commercial artists are held accountable for what they do. They have to communicate something, and if they don't get paid. Whereas fine artists tend to be a lot more subjective, and they're not held accountable, and they often think that what they do is good just because they do it, But when you're a fine artist, there has to be this impenetrable wall between the making of the art and the selling of the art. It's as simple as that. You have to follow your bliss. You have to paint the beauty that you see, regardless of whether it's going to sell anything. And then you produce a body of work, and then you say, well, how can I sell it? Then that's separate. You do what you can to market it. Most artists, it takes a long time before you can make a living, and it's something you do because you love it. That's the way it is. Don't be an artist for the money. If you're going to be an artist, do it because you have to. Do it because you have to.